the lockdown has been extended till 17th May. So we'll have lockdown for almost 2 months, 58 days lockdown, which is the longest lockdown and the biggest lockdown in the history of India. It is impacting everyone, all the countries around the world. It impacts developing countries, developed countries. It does not spare anyone. And basically, if we see, there are three dimensions of this lockdown, which has got implications going forward. One is the science dimension, second is the sustainability dimension, and the third is the social dimension, the way I would like to put it. And then I will go specifically to our industry. Science dimension, we don't fully understand the virus at this particular moment. All of us in the healthcare industry, and Sadhana knows it much better. We are working with various alternatives. Every day there is an experimental drug which is being talked about because we don't understand fully this virus at the moment. There are multiple testing methodologies which are being developed. There are multiple treatment options which are being examined. And also we are also focusing on the healthcare infrastructure, both in the advanced countries as well as in India, whether it is ready to meet these kind of epidemics. That's the first, the science part of it. Second is the sustainability part of it, and always there is a debate of life and livelihood, which is a very important debate, and maybe Professor Vishwanath must be talking about it. But that is a very, very important debate, and we are trying to balance it out, but we don't know what is the right balance at this particular moment. And the third is the social dimension, which has got a lot of implication for marketing. Human being is a social animal, but this lockdown comes in the way of social contact, touch points, and all those, which has got a lot of implication. Having broadly talked about it, I will talk also of the Indian pharma industry. Basically, we are the pharmacy of the world. We control 20% of the world market. Our product go in more than 200 countries around the world. And we control 60% of vaccine market and 60% of HIV drug market. All of this has got implication on what are the treatment armamentarium we are talking about. So India is at the center stage as far as the whole epidemic is concerned. Now, when we start talking of this epidemic and when we start looking at last 60 days, it has been all of us who have been part of the Indian healthcare industry. Every day has been a new day. Every day has been an exciting day. And we are caught up with a situation of Stockdale. I will use the analogy from Good to Great book. And Stockdale was the leading Vietnam army. And when he came back and he advised on writing the book Good to Great by Collins. And he says, in a crisis kind of situation, you are caught up with psychological duality, where you have to accept brutal facts as they are. So there are facts to this crisis. Secondly, you have to prepare for the worst. Thirdly, you have to take crisis as an opportunity. And fourthly, you have to also imagine what is the end outcome, although very difficult to say. If I look back to this total situation, Indian pharma industry is looking at this situation in that context. Yes, we are facing the brutal facts. When we started this, everything was in doldrums. We didn't know how do we play the role of pharmacy of the world because everything was at standstill. But over a period of time, the industry recovered, and I will just focus on 5 dimensions going forward, what the industry is doing. First is, it is important to get the supply chain in order. And what we as an industry has done, got this supply chain in order. The manufacturing today is around at 60%. Yes, there are still gaps, and maybe Siddharth will be talking about it, but manufacturing has improved, transportation has improved, but we are still having issues of last mile connectivity, where the role of distribution will play a very, very important role. So at the very important point for us was getting it all managed, because medicine, India accounts a very important role as far as the medicine is concerned. And everyone was dependent on us. So getting the supply chain right. And I will say the role of the government, the role of all companies, the role of industry association has been very, very important. And I will like to laud the contribution of workers in the factories, transporters, pharmacy chains, and people working on the ground. Despite all the things, they made sure that we start moving our supply chain. A second problem, which is very, very important. Yes, we have got the manufacturing right. We are able to supply the products around the world. There were many issues during the time, was restriction on imports, whether we can supply both domestic demand and export demand. But fortunately, with great collaboration between India and Indian industry and the government, we have been able to resolve those issues, and we are rightly described as the pharmacy of the world. The second issue, which is very important at this particular moment, is how do we ensure last mile connectivity? How do we get advantage of getting digital, whether it is supply chain, digital order booking, digital payments, so at least we can ensure availability of medicines to the patient. That's the second important point. Third important point, which is very important at this stage, is research and development of drugs. I've never seen the kind of investment which is taking place across the world, whether it is development of vaccine, whether it is development of test methodology, whether it is clinical trials on repurposed drugs. So there is international solidarity and cooperation and dialogue which is taking place, which is a great sign that crises get everyone together. WHO is playing a very important role. There's a collaboration taking place. And many of the vaccine manufacturers in this country, many of the drugs manufacturers in this country are playing a very important role. So India is at the center stage. The fourth point I will talk about is the diversified supply chain. Everyone is talking that India is not the only place, or China is not the only place. We have to look at the sources around the world. So every company is examining, we are examining our API policy. So we are looking at how do we make product available around the world. And last point, which is very, very important, is upskilling. Because the whole dimension is changing, the whole social structure is changing. How do we upskill both the employees in the manufacturing side, field force side, to meet the changing environment? I will stop here and leave it back to Sherry.
Thank you, Mr. Jain, for elaborating on various issues that we are facing and confronting at this point of time. But I think one of the important points that you mentioned is crisis also is an opportunity. So I think there are several areas that we are looking ourselves as an industry. Moving on to Professor Pingali, I think you have been doing a significant amount of work on economics and especially behavioral economics. And there are several industries where the work is happening at this point of time, which are consulting projects as well as academic work. So how do you see the work that is happening outside healthcare, and do you see some connect or relevance of those learning for the healthcare? And my second question is in the context of the customer experiences, how those industries are coping or doing something which could be of value for healthcare industry as well. So if you can elaborate on those 2 points, it will be really great, Professor. Over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Srihari. It's really very nice to be on the panel. When you initially told me to be a part of this panel discussion, I said yes, but when I started seeing the list of speakers who are in there, I started developing cold feet. What would I, an academic who sits on his own ivory tower, will be able to contribute significantly to a discussion of this nature? That's the problem. That's the immediate thought that came to my mind. But then, I'm used to speaking. I need listeners. That's my professional problem. So therefore I said, okay, let's take a chance and, speak out whatever comes to me, and then we'll see what happens. So let me start, in some sense, before the COVID crisis actually came upon us, a friend of mine in University of Florida and I have decided to start working on a research project involving how people in open source community behave. Now, in that process, we started putting together a series of interviews that we wanted to talk to people on in tech sector that would tell us how technology is changing. And we named that series of podcasts as Platforms for Disruption. Guess what? As we started that podcast series, the massive disruption has come in on top of us. So therefore, many of the things that I'm hearing from my set of speakers that I've been interviewing in the last few days becomes very relevant. So what I would like to do at this point in time is take a few top lines that I'm hearing from some of the speakers that I've spoken to in the last few days, both from industry as well as faculty members from leading business schools of the world, and maybe just tell you a few things that I'm hearing. The first thing, as a behavioral economist, when I put my hat on as a behavioral economist, I can tell you this, is that habits are very difficult to change. 1.5 to 2 months ago, had you asked me a question, would you be comfortable teaching a class over Zoom? I would have said, please tell me what you're smoking. I really don't want to teach a class on Zoom. You must be joking if you're asking me. I really love interacting with a lot of people during my class. I walk all over the place. How would I teach in Zoom? Opportunity comes up. Guess what? I've already finished 6 classes on Zoom. And I feel extremely comfortable teaching now on Zoom and encouraging question and answers from people as well. So in other words, what I'm saying is I want to pick up on a point that Sudarshan ji has made a few minutes ago, which is this crisis could be an opportunity in changing the habits. I'm seeing habits being changed across so many industries. Ed tech, which I'm living through right now, I'm also a chairperson for our 1-year MBA program. We've done an inauguration, and we're seeing the change happening all around us where the teaching methodologies are changing. Now, the second thing, one of the speakers that I spoke to, he's the CEO of a major technology company. He ended up telling me something very relevant. He said, the point he was making is the firms that survive in this crisis are the firms that are adaptable. Okay, what do you mean by adaptability, in a crisis time? The adaptability is that the one who can pivot their business models faster and enable their employees across all hierarchy levels to actually start taking crucial decisions. How do you do that by managing the business risk is a question that still needs to be investigated upon a little bit. But it seems that emerging business model that I'm seeing come out is that you're going to have a lot more leaders in an organization right now who are capable of taking businesses forward. And I don't see a reason why this kind of a business model is not going to be applicable to the healthcare sector. In fact, actually, healthcare sector might be the place where you'll see a lot more leadership decisions, crucial strategy decisions being dispersed across various set of people across hierarchy. Gone are the days where the CEO is sitting in the C-suite and surrounded by 7-8 people who are taking a set of crucial decisions. Let me talk a little bit about my research that I'm doing with a colleague of mine, Professor Amit Khanna, and another friend of mine in Bombay. What is it that we are talking about? Who are the firms that survive in uncertain environment? We've shown it very distinctly. When there is policy uncertainty from the government standpoint, it is the Indian firms that are taking a significant amount of advantage when compared to MNCs in India. This is not a theoretical study by any stretch of imagination. This is data. This is data related to pharmaceuticals that we're seeing right now. Okay, the paper hopefully will be published very soon. But what I'm talking about in this particular case is why is it that Indian firms are doing a little better? It is because, again, the fact is they have decision making at a different level. The overall argument of very streamlined decision making probably is not working. That's a part of missing piece as far as our research is concerned. I think we're going to investigate further on this argument of what makes Indian firms a little different. So therefore, I see a lot of opportunity that's coming our way. I'll go back to Sudarshanji's point in every sense of the word. I see an opportunity. Opportunity for two things. Opportunity one is a massive behavioral change that is being forced upon us. Opportunity that we are seeing already in several industries. Opportunity number two is for the industries to come together and inculcate learnings that they're seeing from one industry to the other industry. The platform, Mr. Shriari, I appreciate you putting together is exactly this. I actually see that if you have cross-industry pollination happening, there's a lot of interesting set of ideas that come through. Let me give you an example. There is a person there is a chief technology officer of a major Indian conglomerate that I was speaking to yesterday. They were going through this journey of digital transformation. They're traditional automobile manufacturers. I don't want to give away the name of the company. The traditional automobile manufacturers, today they're manufacturing medical equipment that is required for the crisis. That's probably, and when I asked the CEO, this person, why they're able to do this, the entire argument is flexibility in their manufacturing processes, adaptability in their manufacturing processes, and technology being at the core of their manufacturing processes. Can I see health tech take this particular decision, take this idea forward? I can definitely see this. Now, the second thing, the second question, coming to the second question that you've asked me, consumer experiences. Now, Mahindra has designed an artificial intelligence system where the customer gets a very, very, very strong idea of what a car is before they actually go in. I'm being told by a very senior person within the conglomerate that this transformation is not limited to a posh customer living in South Bombay. This is actually going to tractors, and the tractors are being sold to villages. This entire virtual experience of customer engagement across all levels. Now, that's another thing that healthcare can pick up. What is the way in which you can engage doctors? What's the way in which you can engage customers in the virtual space? Is this the only traditional model where you actually go to the doctor and detail for your drugs, or is there an emerging model? One of the young entrepreneurs that I work very closely with actually has a solution. He says that he wants to engage with doctors in a completely different way by looking at training programs that are customized for these beds. He's working very closely with some of us. So there are several ways in which business models as we speak now are pivoting. And the two terms that I'd come back to are flexibility and adaptability. Flexibility to be able to move across business from across multiple products, multiple verticals, and adaptability in the sense of being able to quickly react to the changing circumstances and sometimes being proactive about it. So on that note, I'd like to end the, to cede the control back to you. We can take further questions as we go back.
Thank you, Professor. And I think very, very relevant examples. And I think the key word that you're talking about, I think, is adaptability. So this environment is going to teach us so many things about adaptability. Coming over to you, Mr. Ashok Jain. Hello, can you hear me, sir? You're on mute. You're on mute. Yeah. So I think last probably few days or few weeks we have seen significant emergence of the word teleconsultation. Now again, this word probably is more appropriate word could be remote consultation, because whether it is a telephone, it is audio, video, whatever, but it's a remote consultation, and significant interest by the doctors, by the patients, by the pharma industry, and maybe retail side as well. So A is that some of these changes that are happening today, will they stick? And will they stick, say, for certain set of doctors, certain set of patients, certain geographies? So this remote consultation, how it will continue post-COVID, I think is the one question I have for you. And second question, which is also a related question, I would say, is that what is the reaction of the sort of practicing doctors today to this new paradigm of remote consultation? Yeah, because they feel that they think that they must see and touch the patient. So moving to a remote consultation, so how they think about it? So if you can address both these questions, Mr. Jain, that would be great.
Thanks, Shri Hari, for inviting in this panel discussion. Mine is specifically to the tele-consultation, remote consultation, so I'll concentrate only on that. Whatever we learned in our academics, that behavior is difficult to change. Okay, so now we have undergone COVID, 6 months, 1 month, 2 months, etc. I'm actually not too sure how much the behavior will change until it extends to one more lockdown or few more months. Having said that, what I'm convinced that some of the positive behavior will change, which means what Professor Pingley talked about, Zoom, webinar, hygiene, safety, all that, definitely we will start imbibing it. And that would be a good change in my mind. When you talk about teleconsultation, if you look at it, surely it reduces travel time, it makes much more convenient, keeps health record, documents in digital forms, elderly patient, parents, routine follow-up, etc. It has a lot of advantages. Now, when we speak to the doctors today, the doctors are also not willing to go to their clinic for their own safety. They are not sure that how it will impact them, and therefore they are also taking a view that let's wait and watch. So, and some of the Zoom meetings that I have been attending, some of the doctors, like especially the ENT, dentist, etc., are very concerned about it, that how we would see the throat of the patient, etc., etc. So I think in my mind, going forward, this would definitely move in. immediate future, definitely more and more doctors would start implementing it because of the COVID fear. And once they start seeing the utility of that, they will continue that. Similarly, in the chronic therapies, I clearly see cardiologists, diabetologists, endocrinologists, maybe a dermatologist. All of us goes to the doctor, travel, wait for 2 hours, 3 hours. The doctor sees for 10 minutes, and we just go with our report, and he says everything is okay. You continue to take these medicines. I think the doctor is also getting familiar through the industry or otherwise on a lot of these technology forums. So I think it would continue in my mind. And as the trend picks up for the chronic patients, for the difficult to treat, it would continue, is what my sense is. Similarly, I see another opportunity, which today also as an industry giving it, we are going more on the metro city, class 1 towns, etc. I see another advantage where the person is coming from, say, Bharuch, or a person is coming from a distant part of the Bihar to Patna to see the doctor. His another person comes in, he stays for a 1 night. And if there is an opportunity thereby, by this time, using such a simple methodology, if he can get into that, that would be a great boon to the doctor and surely to the patient, is what I think. So my sense is it will continue. Will it continue? If you ask me the early reactions, what we are seeing in the way we are getting used to these technologies, same are the doctors. The doctors also not familiar. They also have a lot of concerns, and therefore they are also trying to adapt because there is no other option. And in this adoption, what we are saying, the younger doctors, the doctors between 30 to 50, who are tech savvy, who understand, they are easy to adapt. Similarly, you see the chronic, where the doctor doesn't want too much of the reports, he doesn't have to physically see. There's a very good response. And whenever we have asked these kind of that, hey doc, would you want to have that? There's a good response coming in. Also, some of the doctors have been saying, and they've been discussing that post-COVID, how we would open the clinic, social distance, clinic being so small. And I think they find it's a good methodology. The people are also saying that it is also a good utilization of time. Suppose there's a morning consultancy, there's an evening consultancy, and in between they have afternoon time or a time convenient to their schedules. They can effectively use in this one. Having said that, if you go to the doctor today and ask him what's uppermost in his mind, he doesn't uses all this terminology. His uppermost in the mind is COVID is there. My patients are wanting me. I'm not able to get connected. Can you make that person connected to us? So I think his simple method question or simple solution is seeking is, can my patient get connected to me now that I have started practice, and during the lockdown, how do I treat my patients? And then second question he asks is, how do I have a payment gateway, which is simple to use, and I don't want any complicated things because I don't have time. And maybe in the second stage is saying those what we see in the US or other countries, EMR, patient record. He said that we will see later on. First you get that. And I just give you example of my own company that we try to connect with a one doctor and the doctor's patient. I was extremely surprised. There were 200 alumni in attendance, which means, and that's in the Bombay. So I think it would go in. The concerns the doctors have is, what will happen to data confidentiality? My patient's data, my data, if I give it to someone would pass on to someone? Would there be a privacy, security? I think these are the ones. But I think in my sense is, having doctor also enjoyed this part, it would continue. In what form, shape? Surely for the chronic therapy, definitely. And some of the I see a good opportunity in treating the patients which are far off one.
Yeah, very valid points, Mr. Jain. I think so. You're talking about the changes happening from both the sides, doctors, and also maybe from patient sides. As you mentioned, chronic care. On some other discussion, I was having a conversation, and someone mentioned that I got 82-year-old father, and every 3 months I take him to endocrinologist, and now instead of taking him to the hospital or waiting room and making him sit over there for half an hour, why should I expose him to that environment? It's better that if there is a doctor available, I'll do a video consultation. So I think that probably push is going to happen even from the patient side, and then we will definitely see some more adoption moving on from here. So thank you, Mr. Jain. Coming to my next question, and that is for you, Dr. Sadhna, we have been looking at various methodologies in which doctors, they acquire knowledge. Yeah, so whether it is webinars or whether it is reading books or reading online journals or attending seminars and so on and so forth. So with this change, which is a massive change happening at this point of time, and I think every company is trying to organize something or else for the doctors, going forward, how do you see this trend of knowledge acquisition by the doctors? And given that trend or potential trend, what is that pharma industry can do that, and how meaningful role they can play? I think is one part of the question. The second question is that also pharma industry has been trying to access or reach out to the patients in chronic space, if not for everyone. And how do you see that, with this situation now, with more digitalization, whether that trend will pick up at a faster pace going forward, is something if we can comment on, that will be really helpful. Over to you, Dr. Sadhna.
So thank you, Sri Hari. I want to actually start off by thanking NextPlan Consulting and you specifically for having me on this panel. And I want to say a big hello to everybody. We talk about a virtual world, but it's a world where I think they can see us, but we can't see any one of them. So that's a bit of an irony, actually. Let me take your first question about knowledge acquisition by doctors. So if I look at it holistically, there are probably 3 or 4 key ways in which a doctor acquires knowledge. So the most traditional one is the congresses and the conferences that a doctor attends. So these are big events organized or hosted by medical associations, or they could even be events organized by the pharmaceutical company. So that's one way in which a doctor acquires knowledge. The other one, as you mentioned, is always about reading books, reading journals. So all the latest information, all the latest results, they're all published in journals. So whether you want a hard copy or you want an online subscription, but it's all about reading through these journals. The third one is pharmaceutical industry representatives actually meeting with doctors and passing on information. So I've seen in the Western world, especially, the concept of an MSL or a medical science liaison is extremely strong in terms of the ability to engage in peer-to-peer discussions with doctors, to be able to communicate science and to gain insights from these doctors. In India, I haven't seen that culture of MSLs to the same extent, but we do have very good quality medical representatives who go and who engage with doctors. And the fourth source of information is this whole piece of virtual meetings, virtual webinars, live videos, etc. Now, this last 1 month of lockdown has actually given me a chance to connect with all my physician colleagues. Most of them are either in corporate hospitals or they have their own hospitals or consulting practices. So we've been talking a lot about the impact of COVID on their practice. Now, I did a quick poll with them and I said, of these different sources of information, which are the ones that you really find relevant? And guess what? What won hands down, absolutely hands down, was the virtual world. So it's quite strange that it's actually, if you go to see the new kid on the block in a way, and yet everybody seems to favor the virtual world. They in fact mentioned even in the traditional congresses that 1 day or half a day that is really reserved for live demonstrations, live procedures, simulation exercises, some hands-on exercises. That's the piece that they appreciate the most. So how will this look in the new world? I hesitate to use the word post-COVID because I don't think we are in the post-COVID phase at all. And I don't think we'll be in that phase for the foreseeable near future. So I would tend to use the word the new normal post the lockdown lift. And if you look at the next 12 months time frame, I think doctors will be quite apprehensive to attend face-to-face traditional conferences. So for me, that's almost out for the next 12 months or so. And if you actually see ADA, which is the American Dermatology Association meeting, EULAR, which is the Rheumatology League so European League against Rheumatology, or you see even I think the World Ophthalmology Conference, all of them for this very year have decided to go online, saying the impact of COVID. So that for me is definitely going to go down over the next 12 months. You look at the second source, which is published literature, that will stay because that's really a contactless way of sourcing information. That leaves us with the remaining two. One is the virtual meetings and the other one is the industry representatives face-to-face meetings. So in the new world, if you want to know what can industry do to be really considered as a knowledge partner, I think the first and foremost is virtual platforms are here to stay. They're going to be the mainstay for all of us. So we can consider using these platforms, not just for the typical virtually run meetings as we've been doing traditionally, but try and bring innovation. And I'll probably try and share one or two examples that come to my mind from different parts of the world. So I don't know how many of you in the audience have used the live chat page on, let's say, a third-party virtual platform. I used it once to do a remote or to run a remote advisory board. So on a live chat page, essentially what you can do is you leave your questions and you give a defined time frame to the doctors, to your invited group of doctors. They come in whenever it's convenient to them and they will respond to the questions that you posed. Now, as I said, I ran it for an advisory board, extremely effective. What we can do is actually consider using such a forum for, let's say, case study or case study discussions or expert group discussions. Go in there, put in your content, leave your questions there, and give a chance to doctors to come over the next, say, 2 days or 3 days to respond to those questions. And the beauty is that the doctors can actually tag other invited doctors. So if they tag these doctors, there is a fair amount of discussion that takes place between these doctors because they know once they are tagged and they come back there enthusiastically to see who is tagging me and how do I respond to that. So that could be one option that people can consider to make it really engaging for the physician community. The other one is, so this is on a third-party platform. If you have your own company platform, I'm sure everybody has websites, company websites on which you put a lot of content for the physicians. You also provide literature resource for these doctors. Now try and imagine that you have this platform, which is a company-owned platform, but you're trying to bring in innovation. Let me take an example. Let's say you're a cardiovascular company. You want to put on some literature there. You say that you want to give weekly updates in the field of hypertension. Currently, what do most companies do? They will look at the literature for the last 7 days, either through PubMed, Embase, or whichever databases they have access to. Manually go through those articles. So let's say you get a dump of 200 articles. They will manually screen those articles, and let's say they find about 20 articles that they feel are relevant to the doctors. So these 20 articles or the links to these articles will be put up on your company platform. Now, imagine instead of this, you were to create algorithms, use artificial intelligence. Suddenly, you save all this manual labor, and you can really hit the right articles over a period of time because your algorithms become stronger and stronger as you start searching for data every 7 days. So what I'm trying to say is try and pull doctors into something that they want rather than pushing something that we believe is useful to the doctors. So it's not about what we think they want. It's about first finding out what they want and then giving that to them. The third example that I'm going to give, and that's really, really recent, is I won't say I'm a big Twitter fan, but I am present on Twitter. And especially currently during the COVID situation, I've been following Twitter to see what global KOLs what are global KOLs saying for different vaccines, for different therapies that are being tried. Because as Mr. Sudarshan Jain said, there is so much happening in terms of new trials, new vaccines being tested in human beings. Take a classic example of remdesivir. Everyone's been talking about remdesivir results. Just go on Twitter and see what kind of interactions are taking place, super interactions. So you know that there is Chinese data that came out first, but because it didn't recruit sufficient numbers, the power went down and the results obviously didn't come out positive. Then Gilead came out with its results, but those results were criticized because there was no control arm. Then came the latest results from Chicago. And there's been so much of discussion on whether mortality or saving lives is more important or time to hospital discharge is more important. Now, just take this situation. You follow these doctors, you know what's being discussed, you can sense the behavior of these doctors. What if you create a closed group forum in India on one of the virtual platforms, invite doctors to that, share these global insights, and then see what's relevant to India. Engage doctors in that discussion to see, what do you think is relevant to India? Is it not overwhelming the healthcare system and therefore wanting patients to be discharged quickly? Or is it the fact that I can reduce mortality by X percentage? I think that could be an extremely interesting value add for the doctors. So that's the whole piece of the virtual world. And the last avenue for doctors that I touched upon was the face-to-face meetings that the pharmaceutical industry representatives hold. Now, let's be honest, let's face it. If we are talking about remote consultation, because doctors and patients don't want to come in contact with each other, I don't think we're going to have the luxury of doctors wanting to meet pharmaceutical representatives because of the apprehension that they might contract the disease. So for the foreseeable future, any contact that they can avoid with anybody, they're going to do that. So to my mind, again, I think what's critical is that every opportunity that the medical representative gets or an MSL gets to meet a doctor face-to-face, I think we need to optimize each and every such opportunity. Go digital, go with the right content to these guys. And I think that's going to be the success.
Yeah, thanks. Yes.
So coming to your second question, which is the patient-related angle, right? So how do I see the industry-patient relationship really stemming? So pre-COVID, and let's keep in mind that the pharma industry business model is not a B2C model, right? It's a B2B2C model, which means as such, the industry doesn't engage with patients as much as it engages with the doctors. And of course, there's a disclaimer, I'm talking about prescription drugs more than the OTC segment. So you look at once a patient has been diagnosed with a disease and has been prescribed a drug, the key patient interactions are the whole gamut of patient support programs that the industry puts together and the patient access programs. Now, even today, if you see 90% of those are actually virtual. And therefore, I don't really see much changing in that space. Where I see a lot can change is in patient education. If we can use the patient apps very effectively, I think that will be a game changer for companies. And before I pause, I'll give you one example. In one of the Latin American markets, we actually did a survey with patients on the utility of the patient app. And most patients actually told us that they like it in the beginning, but there is no continuum of information provided to them. So over a period of time, they don't find it very utilitarian. So imagine if you create a patient app on which you are able to push information at the right time for the right patient at the right stage of his disease. I think that including the new recruiting studies so that he or she can consider participating in them, that would truly be a game changer.
Thank you, Dr. Sadhana, and thank you for addressing both the questions. I think one of the important point that you made is permission marketing. Yeah, so I think you said that rather than pushing, can we pull doctors to our media and to our platforms? I think that is very, very important point. Coming over to the other side, which is the supply side, and Siddharth, I'm going to pick up your brains for that. And then I'm sure over last 20 days or 1 month, there must have been significant upstick in terms of the demand and how you're managing the supply side. It must have been a pretty difficult task. So I was just trying to understand more from the behavioral aspects of the patients, that what are the kind of trends that you see, that all those who have been buying earlier, they have suddenly started buying more, or is it like you're getting completely new set of patients, or those who were inactive at one point of time suddenly started using this as a as a channel? That is first part of the question. And second part is like, how do you see going forward, whether chronic versus acute, rural versus city based, so how do you see those trends on the e-commerce or e-pharmacy side evolving as we move forward even post-COVID? So
sure. So first of all, thank you very much once again for having me on the panel. I think my age is lesser than the experience of most of these panelists. So whatever I say, please take that with a pinch or a bucket of salt as you may deem fit. I think obviously COVID has fundamentally changed the way the Indian consumer and the Indian doctor is reacting. There is no doubt in that, right? And I think given this forum, I want to take the opportunity of actually sharing some facts which are what I would like to call hard truths, right? And I think the first stage for all of us is unfortunately going to be denial. But the idea is that the faster you accept, I think the better we can all be, right? So the first thing that we're realizing is that there is an undoubted shift towards the digital medium. Everybody wants services and products to come home. That is a very clear message that we are seeing. On our digital platforms, we've seen engagement go up from a consumer end by as much as 100%, right? And this is a very, very preliminary sense of what we are getting, right? I think we have to understand that what we are seeing now during lockdown is not just what is going to happen in lockdown. We have to understand from things, not just from lockdown, but even when the lockdown goes up, in the post-lockdown to the period that you get vaccines, you will find that the patients will become risk averse. So even if there is no lockdown, I don't see that patients are going to suddenly start coming and going to doctors. Our data tells us that the new prescription generation in the month of April is down by about 74%, right? It doesn't mean that people are not falling ill or chronic people don't need medicines, but new prescription generation is down 74%. Yet we are seeing on our platform a rise of more than 100% in terms of demand. What does that mean? It means that people are adopting digital methods, right? So is this a secular fundamental shift in people's preferences towards digital? I think there is no mistake in that, right? Now, digital can be different things. Our model of digital coexists with existing retailers, right? We ourselves don't own any retail store. We gather the order, think of it like the way you order food on Swiggy, it comes on the platform and then goes to a nearby restaurant. We gather the order and give it to a nearby pharmacy. Our model is a B2B platform. We buy in bulk from pharma companies and whatever it is that these retailers need, we supply to them, but we work with local retailers, right? So even if you're working with your local retailer, there is a fundamental shift on a digital platform and there is no going away from this, right? People may have different ways. Some retailers like Wellness or Apollo or MedPlus will have their own stores and their own online pharmacies. Someone like us will be an aggregator, but there is no denying the fact that there is an underlying shift towards digital. Number two, 74% drop in new prescriptions is what we have seen. Having said that, we have seen that 84% of doctors that have written prescriptions have used digital medium for the first time in the last 30 days. So whether we accept it or not, doctors are going to use the digital medium for interacting with patients. The only question is, will platforms like Practo run? Will platforms like Liberate run? My answer to that is no. So I don't mean to disparage Practo or Liberate, but please understand there are two kinds of platforms. A platform like Practo, which lists down, it's a directory of 1 lakh doctors. So if I'm a doctor, Dr. Siddharth Shah, somebody can find a Dr. Sudarshan Jain or a Dr. Ashok Jain also on that platform. And as Dr. Siddharth Shah, I am very worried that if somebody searches my name, they can also find Dr. Sudarshan Jain, because Dr. Sudarshan Jain is paying Practo to get listed on the platform. And on that platform, will I lose my patients to some other patient? This is a worry of the doctors. I'm not saying whether Practo is good or bad. From a patient's perspective, Practo is very good because you get information of 50 doctors or 100 doctors in your vicinity. But as a doctor, you are worried. The second platform is a platform like Liberate or a platform like DocsApp, where you can go and find out that, okay, there is a doctor, but there is also a doctor who's paid a fixed fee by Liberate, who's paid a fixed amount per month, and which is why if you as a doctor charge, let's say 500 rupees, Liberate will give an ad that the next consultation with Liberate doctor is at 99 rupees, right? Now there is a third category of tools, which is, think of it like Zoom, right? The way today you and I use a Zoom for communication, but it is a closed-ended tool. I can send my link, only the people who have the link can join me on the platform. There are platforms like DocOn, right, that I've heard of, which is like a Zoom kind of a tool, which has a EMR platform, which has a video consultation in it, which has a scheduling of appointment with the doctor and payment gateway, right? To the best of my understanding, a platform like DocOn had 2,500 doctors till the month of March. In the month of April, there are 15,000 new doctors that want to use DocOn. They have only been able to add 3,500. There is a waiting list of 20 days to start using DocOn, because the doctor has to set up his payment gateway, scheduling, so on and so forth. But the bottom line is, I'm giving you these examples to say that doctors are going to go onto a digital platform. Especially your KOLs and KBLs are themselves above the age of 55. They themselves will have comorbidity issues. And hence you will definitely see that doctors themselves will be scared to some extent to get infected by their patients. And they are going to use digital, right? Now, the important question is that when patients are going digital, doctors are going digital, what is the role that we will see of healthcare sales agents, pharma companies? How do you protect yourself and how do you adopt yourself, right? So I think if anybody is living in a world where they think that patients are not going to go digital or doctors are not going to go digital, I think it is an ostrich approach where we are living in denial, right? Having said this, I think we are amongst the few countries, and I mean it, where even today the prevalence of digital mediums is very less, which means that there is a great opportunity for somebody who wants to do that. There are less than 1% of doctors who have used digital mediums, or less than 1% of our prescriptions were digital before 1st of April, which means there is an entirely new world out there which is waiting, right? As healthcare professionals, if you can go and become the friend of the doctor to virtualize their practice, right? The way today you are having a virtual session, ideally we would have had these 500 people in one meeting room and we would have spoken. Today there are 500 people and we are talking on Zoom. Please understand, your doctor needs a virtual setup. It is your job to help him create that virtual setup, right? That is how you will become the best friend of the doctor. And if you are the one who's creating the doctor's virtual setup, if you are the one who's facilitating the doctor's virtual interaction with his patients, if you are the one who's capturing the patient going into a digital platform, you are now embedding yourself digitally in that doctor's network. You are then not embedding yourself because you are promoting product X or a product Y. You are now part of the family that the doctor is going to interact with on a daily level, right? And I think this is very important, right? So coming from a digital profession or a digital healthcare entrepreneur, I can understand that it is very easy for me to say this. Maybe my lack of experience is coming in handy because I am able to visualize the entire ecosystem ground up, right? But I think for people who are in the system, you may perhaps not be as digitally savvy, but what you have today is the relation. You have the relation with the doctor, you have the relation with your patients, you have run patient support programs. Go out there and make them digitally savvy, and they will remember you forever, right? I cannot forget the first teacher that taught me how to write my alphabet. I cannot forget the first teacher that taught me how to do drawing. I cannot forget my first professor at IMA who taught me a certain subject. If you are that person who's going to make your doctor digital, if you are the person that is going to make your patient support digital, you will not just be a star for yourself, but for your company, for the doctor, and for everybody. And this digital, please understand, the most expensive real estate in the world is not Mumbai, not Manhattan. It is not any part. The most expensive real estate is what happens on this phone. This phone has only 20 apps on the homepage. And the person who will embed themselves as part of that digital platform on the doctor's platform, every single day on that real estate, the doctor will remember you or the patient will remember you, right? So I don't want to go into things like what is in the industry and so on and so forth. You people know that better than me, right? You know that chronic segment is going to grow because people who are chronically ill now have a much bigger worry. So far, if I was borderline hypertension, borderline diabetic, I was like, theek hai, dekha jayega. Now I am worried because now with comorbidity, and if I get COVID, I am gone. So please understand, chronic segment is going to grow without a point. Acute segment, how much ever you try, new prescription generation is going to be less. I am going to maybe care a little less about how I look, whether I have pigmentation, whether I'm losing hair. But even if I'm borderline diabetic, trust me, I am going to take care of my smallest of the smallest requirements. So your focus on wellness, focus on chronic segments is going to rise. Whatever you see in your sales trend right now is all temporary. What you are going to see is much more permanent. So please look beyond the lockdown. COVID is not equal to lockdown. COVID is what is going to happen after the lockdown. COVID is the time to build trust, and the people who will build trust are the ones who are going to see the maximum success, right? So that is all that I have to share. So I don't want to go more into data and insights, but I just want to touch upon some of these fundamental things, right? And maybe at the end of the session, if there are any specific questions, I'll be very happy to answer of what are the more digital undercurrents that I'm seeing, right? But thank you very much once again for having me, and please pardon me if there is anything that I have said which is not conventional. Like I've said, my age is maybe lesser than the experience of most of these panelists, but I'm just putting forward what I think and what I'm seeing and what I'm perceiving from my perspective.
Great insights, Siddharth. Actually, I'm reading some of the chat and the comments that is happening parallelly. So some of them they're saying great advice and a very honest and brutal piece of advice. Yeah. So for pharma industry professionals, yeah, I think the clear writing on the wall is very clear that doctor side, patient side, I think everyone is adopting more and more digital. Now, which platform, how they will play with that is all, it's a matter of details. But I think the journey or the direction is very clear, as you're saying. Yeah? And we appreciate your comments. Coming to Suzanne, I think since Siddharth talked about digitalization happening in every space around the healthcare, how do we see now role of the sales rep? If I look at the questions that I've received, Suzanne, I think the maximum number of questions have come in the space of role of the sales rep.
Being young, but the fact that you're so into the system, you're digitally savvy, you're there right in the heart of everything that is happening, and that's what making you different. So come to the very so Shrihari, we have you back.
Yeah, I know.
Thanks so much, Shrihari, for inviting me onto this panel. I'm very happy and to be part of this August team. I actually, I was telling Srihari some time back this whole story that, the moment the COVID happened and everyone, almost every company wanted us to develop emailers and WhatsApp messages and, webinars. And then I was thinking of a very interesting book that I'd read, which is Daniel Kahneman's, which says Thinking Fast and Slow. And I think it's a very, very valid book that you actually, if people can read, it's a wonderful book which tells you that our mind works in two systems. Yeah, the first system is that you think very fast, you're emotional, you just kind of go out there and do everything that you feel that should salvage the situation. And then the second system kicks in, because that's when you start rationalizing, you slow down, you think a little bit more pragmatic and say that, does this really work? And that's typically what happened with the industry, because everyone put all these messages out there. I think there was IMA which put up one notice saying that, no more WhatsApp messages to doctors. And then the industry got a little worried. Hey, listen, no webinars, no WhatsApp messages, nothing we should be sending across. Now, how do I handle this? So I think that's where the whole point comes back, that in this world and in this era, and I think something which, if I see maybe somewhere back in 2009, 2010, we did speak about this whole omni-channel way of marketing, right? It's not that the reps are going to get redundant or, that whole system will not work, because the analogy is exactly what happened even in the consumer world. I mean, it's very digital today, but does that mean that TV has become redundant? Sure enough, some amount of print must have come down, some amount of other, media must have repurposed itself, but clearly there has been a role for digital, there has been a role for TV, there has been a role for print, and that's typically what's going to happen after this. Because this is where, the whole ecosystem starts kicking in terms of how you leverage the reps' connection with the doctors. And the way you will handle digital has to be far more different than what we were used to. So most of the time, if people talk digital, it used to be PDFs, it used to be maybe some push mails that used to go to the doctors. And that's what possibly was thought about as a digital strategy. And that's coming back to the most important thing, that so what really is going to be the way forward? And I could see a lot of questions coming on the Q&A that, is IoT going to work? Will we have more of patient centricity? Will we have more of doctors getting, agitated with so much of webinars happening? And that's, I think, I look at it, and I know I'm at the fag end of the webinar and we have some time constraints, but just in the interest of time, I think the three things which are going to be very, very important is, as Dr. Sadhana rightly said, it's not about the kind of message and information that we are pushing out there. I read some statistics that every 73 days, there is double the medical information that is happening online, which means that the plethora of information that is going out there is humongous. And at the same time, our attention span is worse than a goldfish. So we have to see how to get that information in the most interesting way in the customer's mind. So what are the three things which comes to my mind and which I think are very important for brand managers or even for the marketing world is, clearly it's about the insights. Do we know our doctors? Do we know integrally how they are behaving on the online medium? As Mr. Ashok Jain also said, that teleconsult is going to happen. A lot of them are definitely going to be doing that. I mean, right from 10% penetration, we are right now to 80% of doctors wanting to be on teleconsult. How do we know these doctors better? Are we only going to look at them from a demographic segmentation, geographical segmentation? No, my dear friends, I think we'll have to get into behavioral understanding. So what it actually means, and as I'm speaking, I think you will also start seeing that the role of the people inside the organization is going to change. The kind of people you'll need in your organization are going to change. You will need people who will understand these doctors. I mean, imagine how we were when we were on the digital medium, right? We had a lot of push messages coming to us. Today, if I want to buy something, Amazon knows me at a very personal level. If they know me so well that they start tracking me, they start going programmatic, they start targeting me. And that's really what is going to happen for all of us. How much do we know the online behavior of our doctors? How much time are we going to invest? And we have to do that. We have to put as much investment as possible in knowing our doctors, like we knew them through our reps. how much are we going to know them through the online behavior? Then comes the second part of it, which is the content strategy. I'm not going to talk much about this because Dr. Sadhana has spoken enough on it. It's not about what we want to tell them. It's about what they want to hear. So what do we know about what they want to hear? What is the kind of social listening tools we are going to use? What are the techniques that we are going to know, that what kind of content in, maybe you have a campaign, but across different channels, how are you going to make snackable bites? How are you going to do it in bite size? How are you going to make it far more consistent and cohesive? I still remember back in my brand manager days, I used to always think, you know, when I'm doing the same strategy, why is one territory not doing well and the other one doing better? And then at times we say, oh, you know, the rep there is far more efficient, he is better, he is able to say the things better. And that's where actually a lot of that, you know, equalization will start happening. So content strategy, the way you're going to say it. And the third piece, I think, which is again extremely critical and more important for our industry, is going to be data analytics. The whole thing about what we're doing with doctors and what we are going to do on the digital medium, this is going to be your, you know, your biggest chance to start knowing them even better. And why analytics is important? Because if you're not going to measure, how do you know what's working? And how are you going to iterate your strategy if you don't know what is really working out there? So that's really another point, which brings to one of the questions which Shriyari had put to me was, what's happening in the global world? Trust me, everywhere now it is about personalization. In fact, GSK has a tool that they're using called as the personalized intelligence management. How am I going to personalize my messaging, my interactions? And believe me, this doesn't mean that the rep is going to be redundant. The same message that you're trying to figure out on the online medium, you're going to use your rep far more effectively to deliver it. Or maybe the way we are talking about IoT, he exactly knows what the doctor must have possibly read yesterday on the digital space, or maybe a week earlier, and he's going to interact with the doctor far more meaningfully than what he did before. So it may not be that we will have the same, you know, whole set of reps all over the place, but we possibly will pick and choose. We will start making them far more competent. We will start connecting the dots better, and we will actually have a much better way of handling our brands. And that's really what's happening globally. The third thing is, I mean, apart from these three very specific points, I must tell you that one of the, you know, areas which I think Siddharth again very rightly mentioned, that we know what doctors are doing and what they possibly have their pain points as far as teleconsult is concerned. But do you know what patients have a problem when they are doing teleconsult? A lot of patients are not able to connect with doctors. And if technically, I think a doctor spends some 7 or 8 minutes inside the clinic, over the teleconsult, he may have even lesser time or even a little bit, you know, within that space, but he doesn't feel the patient. He doesn't know the patient. How are we going to equip our patients to start connecting to these doctors with the right diagnosis? Because to a large extent, they're going to be presenting their facts and symptoms through this video method. And this is, again, I must give you examples of companies who have invested in AI tools. They have invested in algorithms. They have invested in tools within the teleconsult video channels, the customer experience that they have created. And that is what has been the turning point. So in most matured markets, there has been a digital saturation. And if brand managers and marketing heads can actually start seeing that they have already gone that ahead, what is it that they have gone through as their pain points? And we don't need to go through those pain points again, because we can reach that space even faster today. Like we just mentioned that our digital adoption is not that great. The faster we get up there, the faster we start putting more parallel streams of connections, we will be able to have a much better whole. So friends, I know a lot of questions were about, well, our reps will get redundant. What will marketing managers do? I think it needs a completely rehaul overall of the system. But at the same time, there is something very fundamental about the pharma industry, that we know our customers very intimately. But we always had it through our reps. Now the point is, how do I take it into a much bigger leverage and start creating my strategies, my way of dealing with those customers in a much more personalized manner. And I think the most important thing will be that we are no longer going to be cycle managers. You know, we always had this, ye cycle khatam hona hai, I need to do my brand cycle meeting. I think we need to be 24/7 managers. I think we are all going to be so pervasive in what really is happening with our customers. And those insights are going to make us sharper, better, faster, and much more stronger as we go ahead.
Thank you, Suzanne. And I think it has been quite an engaging session. We have exceeded our time, but I think there has been significant response. As I see, we have more than 70 questions. So, you know, so probably it is not possible for us to address all those questions.
Yeah, you need another one now.
Yeah, but what I'm going to do is, of course, we will be, going through this entire video, and we will be taking out a few key points that every speaker has alluded to, and then we'll be circulating back to all the participants so that they have at least the key points of the entire session with them. My last request on this session would be to Mr. Jain as well as to Mr. Ashok Jain, both of them, because one question that kept on coming all the time since yesterday, I must have received at least 20 requests on that the future of the rep. So what is going to happen? And of course, during multiple comments by each one of you on the panel, I think digitalization and movement towards that has been probably clearly communicated as the trend. But may I request Mr. Sudarshan Jain and also Mr. Ashok Jain to give maybe their views, what they think that, what could be the future of the rep. And with that, also we'll sort of summarize the session because already we are at about 8:20 and we don't want to hold, all of you, so my request to Mr. Sudarshan Jain and Mr. Ashok Jain, in whichever sequence they choose. Yeah.
Ashok, you would like to start?
So then you do the closing, huh? Okay. I think my views are, and I'll not say future of rep, I'll say future of the whole Salesforce hierarchy. For any company, the Salesforce cost around 15 to 20% of the sales, total net sales expenses. With the COVID, the sales growth this year would not be as what is expected. So there would be a lot of pressure on the corporate to cut the costs. So that's, I think, one point we need to remember on. Second, my view is that Salesforce roles will change. Will they get eliminated, etc., etc.? Answer is no. They will continue to be there. But I think the role will get more mixed with digital. So if there are 3 visits, 2 visit physical, 1 visit digital, or something like that should happen then. I'm also seeing after use of this digital, the people will start questioning the whole sales hierarchy. In our system, between a rep and a managing director, there may be 5, 6, 7 hierarchy, whatever it is, depending on the company to company. People will start questioning, do we really require so many managers? Can we live with that different hierarchies, etc.? I think that's what it will happen. And a different competencies would be required going forward for the people and the different role responsibility. That's how I see the future of rep. Sudarshan, your viewpoint.
So thank you very much. In fact, the way I look at it is, I will quote again, every crisis is an opportunity. So I'm not taking my hat away from IPA, and I'm looking from a private equity point of view, where we are doing a lot of basic work to understand the whole fact. Every crisis creates an opportunity. It helps to challenge every assumption. So there are internal processes to govern the sales force, the external process to connect with the customers. We are seeing fundamental changes which are taking place, and they will become the normal. Like say the point which Susan was talking about, cycle meeting, review systems, administrative processes, where we used to spend a lot of time. And if I used to say anyone, why do you call everyone for review meetings? Now we totally understand that whether all these reviews, calling everyone, cycle meetings, internal processes, spending so much time on all those, that will become the new normal, certainly, that we will start working more efficiently in those processes. Second is, as far as meeting, the second role of the company is developing the product, supplying the information. What kind of information should be supplied? How do the doctors have to be tackled? And there'll be a lot of pull effect which will generate on the customer insights and the patient insights. And the companies which understand patient insights better and then upskill the sales force accordingly using digital media, using the concept of Sadhna was talking about, MSL. So the upskilling of sales force, the role of sales force will get redefined as the customer's expectations get redefined. Every challenge is an opportunity, and I think it will offer tremendous opportunity, and the opportunity will be distinctive role of the sales force, differentiated role, relevant role, but there will be role of communication to the customer of the product and the proposition what you are talking about. There is a need of awareness, there is need of shaping therapy, because most of the therapies are underdeveloped and under-leveraged. And we'll see in shape of field force and the structure of the field force and the processes of field force getting redefined. Some of them will be permanent, some of them will change. And coming to the question of Siddharth, yes, we are challenging every assumption, Siddharth. We are looking at everything, and some of these things, thought which you are pointing out, both in the private equity world as well as with consumer engagement with some of the companies, we are challenging those assumptions. Some will be permanent, some will stay together. But great insights, and I will close only with the one quote of Nelson Mandela, that future of the changes is whenever there are fundamental changes, the future should be governed by hope and expectations, not by fear. So all of us should look at the future with tremendous hope, tremendous excitement, and there's a great opportunity for Indian pharma industry, because the way I look at it, Indian pharma industry will play a very dominant role worldwide. Over to you, Sherry.
Thank
Sir,
you.
I would just like to add just one thing, sir.
Yes,
I think
go ahead.
Sudarshan sir, you perfectly nailed it. I think this is the time where I do believe that the entire Indian pharma industry, which was already the way we call the pharma drug manufacturer of the world, but I think the Indian consumer or the Indian doctor never got a chance to see what that world-class level process is. I think that will happen now. And the role of every professional from being a salesperson will actually become more like a relationship manager. If you look at the number of people undertaking banking services in India, in banks, you still have relationship managers, right? There are more people employed in financial services and banking, even though it directly reaches less number of Indians than what pharma reaches, right? And I do believe that with digitization and with this change, people's perception of trust, quality, and relationship management is significantly going to increase. And I think that we are best positioned today, like you said, right? I mean, it is unfortunate that we are in this tragedy and this travesty, but I think we all have to take a outstanding message of hope from this, right? And that is what I would completely agree with you on, sir.
Can I take 1 minute if you don't mind?
Yeah.
Can I just take 1 minute?
Yeah.
I see a lot of condescension in chat as well as in question answers about going digital and rural. I think, many people are saying, how is digital and rural compatible with each other and all that stuff? I mean, as a person who worked a lot in financial, on financial services, including for the rural areas and microfinance, I can tell you this. This condescension about rural India has got to stop for us to go forward. And I think the pharmaceutical company that builds this gap of digital divide in the country between urban and rural is going to win it. So the question is not how will rural participate in digital. The question is how, what does it take for rural to participate in digital? I'm sorry for taking that 1 minute extra.
Yeah, thanks, Professor. And I think thanks everyone. A great panel, and I think the kind of feedback that I'm getting has been excellent. There have been great insights, I think, sharing by each one of you. I had also taken a poll to understand that what are the topics which are of relevance and what audience think which are very important topics, and you have got some insights on that as well. So clearly, in the beginning, as I had mentioned, this is the beginning. This is the first of the series of webinars that we plan to have. And I'm sure we are going to use those inputs in ensuring that we have right set of topics which are being covered, which will be really important for the colleagues in the industry. So once again, I thank all the panelists as well as all the participants. We had more than 400 at some point of time. Some people have left now, but I think more than 400 participants. So great number of participants as well. And look forward to interacting with each one of you on the panel as well as attendees in the future upcoming webinars. So good night.
Good
Thank you,
night. Thank
Sherry.
you so much.
Thank
Good night.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Sherry, and thanks to all
Thank
the
you very
Thank you
much.
so much
Thanks
for
for
coming.
having us.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Vishnu. Thanks, Siddharth.